Hi, this is Joe again with another review. For say this video, we'll be discussing the 1955 film Mr. Roberts, starring Henry Fonda, James Cagney, and Jack Lemmon. I always forgot the guy's name. Of course, this movie is, even though it is a war picture, but it's not. It's more of a comedy thing, a stereotypical war movie. And it is based on a play of the same name. And so it's Henry Fonda's title character, Mr. Roberts. And he plays an officer on this particular. It's really a cargo ship. At the end, towards the end of World War II, and he was in the Navy on this ship, this cargo ship that supplies other ships in the Navy. And it is a pretty boring job, and the crew itself is the bored to tears because all they're doing is supplying other ships. They're not on the front lines because I think most of them feel that, including Henry Fonda himself, feels that they're not good enough to be on the front lines. There's a bunch of goofballs, a bunch of slackers, in the Navy, so they get assigned to one of the worst jobs you could possibly have. And Henry Fonda, for 4 years during World War II, he's always asking and begging for a transfer. And of course, while this is going on, he's getting into fights with his captain, played by James Cagney. And you didn't see James Cagney all that much in this film, even though he doesn't get top. He shares top billing with Henry Fonda and Jack Lemmon, but he doesn't get that much screen time in this film. It's mostly Henry Fonda and Jack Lemmon's characters are the ones who got a pretty big bulk of the screen time. And also the guy who plays the ship's doctor. I know the actor who played the part, but the ship's doctor also gets most of the screen time in this film. So what happens is that every time Henry Fonda asks for a transfer, the captain, by regulations, he has to send it. But most of the time, he's always arguing with Henry Fonda because he keeps asking for a transfer. And he says, "Why? You're not happy? You're not satisfied here?" And of course, eventually, every time that Henry Fonda asks for a transfer, James Cagney makes a hole in one and on the crew because they're not happy here. Because the crew likes the Henry Fonda character. He's a little more easygoing with the crew than James Cagney. He acts more like Captain Bligh from Immunity and the Bounty. So he's mostly is that type of a captain. So they have this back and forth between the two of them. And while Jack Lemmon is more the comedic foil in terms of lighting the mood, through this movie, and it feels like that this movie, Mr. Roberts, even though the performances are top notch, it feels like it's like the comedy classic Abbott and Costello in the Navy. It has that type of a feel for it, even though the Abbott and Costello in the Navy came out in the 1940s. This thing was in 1955, and the movie got high praise because there was a whole bunch of war movies that came out at that time, and they were all these dramas, those John Wayne pictures and stuff. And for a switch, you had an actual comedy. So they got a praise because it was a comedic film instead of one of those high drama deals. So about 3/4 of the way through the movie, Henry Fonda finally got his transfer. And how he got it was because the captain was never going to approve it. So what happened was the whole crew forged the captain's signature or the fact that the one who had forged the captain's signature the best sent that letter to the Navy, the big shots in the U.S. Navy, and Mr. Roberts finally got his transfer to get out of it, and he was going to be transferred to a ship, that's going to be in Okinawa, because even though it was announced in the movie that Germany decided to surrender, but there was still the war going on in the Pacific against Japan, so that was still going on. So he gets Mr. Roberts gets transferred to a ship in Okinawa because the Battle of Okinawa was going on at that time. or at least at the time of the end of the movie. So he finally goes, gets shipped out, and it's kind of like the episode of MASH, what happens in the end of MASH, or a particular episode of MASH when Henry Blake finally gets his paperwork home, played by McLean Stevenson in the television show. It's exactly the same type of an ending. Even though the show takes place about 20 years before the television show MASH was on the air, but it's the same ending. What happens is that Jack Lemmon is reading a letter from Mr. Roberts to the whole crew, saying how everybody's doing. I'm doing okay, it's great, I'm finally happy, I got my transfer, I'm on the front lines, and this, that, and everything else. And then Jack Lemmon's character actually got a second letter. One from Mr. Roberts and one from somebody else from his crew, telling the crew of Mr. Roberts' old ship now that Mr. Roberts and another crew member had just died. And this letter was written just before he died, or just before he was killed, by a kamikaze pilot. The kamikaze attacked, and it crashed into the ship and crashed right into where Mr. Roberts was and killed him and another officer. So that's what happened. He finally got his transfer and he ends up dead at the end of the movie. Even though you never actually saw it, but it's implied what happened. So that's major spoiler for those of you who never saw this movie, that Mr. Roberts dies in the end. It's an applied death, because what I mean by that is he didn't actually see the death. But the movie itself, I thought the movie, this first time I ever saw the whole movie, and I knew of the ending of an episode of Happy Days. They have it on DVD. I think it was like the third season or fourth season of Happy Days. There was an episode where Mr. C, Marion, and Joni were going to a movie, and Ralph tells them the ending of Mr. Roberts. And I said, "Oh, what a great movie!" I cried when he died. It keeps ruining the ending of movies. Oh, let's go see this movie. Oh, this thing happened. That happened. In this movie, this happened. That movie, and it's like a running gag with Ralph ruining the ending of movies. And that's what happened here. And it was. That's how I knew the ending of Mr. Roberts, because from that episode of Happy Days. But I'm getting off topic. Well, Mr. Roberts is not a bad. It's not a bad movie. But if you like, Henry Fonda in an actual comedy, and that's what this is, an actual. Even though he's more of a. The same thing with James Cagney. Both of them were straight guys to Jack Lemmon and the rest of the characters in this movie. But I think it's okay, but not great. I remember Mr. Roberts because locally here on TV, here in New York City, before you have all these extra channels on cable and all these extra digital channels like five movies channels or this TV or whatever was on, they always used to show Mr. Roberts on Memorial Day weekend or around Veterans Day. They would show Mr. Roberts like on Channel 9 here in New York. Always just show like Mr. Roberts, PT 109, and stuff like that. So this movie was always on somewhere, and just having to watch it, and it was on recently, and saying record it and watch the movie, and figure it was okay but not great, because it was too long dialogue scenes with Henry Fonda, the doctor, and Jack Lemmon's character all sitting around talking to each other. It was like too many long dialogue scenes, and that's maybe because of the fact that it was a Broadway play first. That's probably what the reason. But if they just cut down some of that stuff, I probably would like the movie more. But it is, you watch it for the three performances of James Cagney, Jack Lemmon, and Henry Fonda. Just watch it for those three, and if you forget all the other hijinks in this movie, if they cut half of that stuff out, the movie probably would have been better if they cut out some of that sillier hijinks in this movie. Like Jack Lemmon trained here on these Navy nurses and stuff. I mean, it was funny for the first scene, but if you see it again and again, it's like the movie Airplanes, which he does review, which the two movies are the same jokes. That's what I felt with this movie. But that's my only knock. So that's my review of the movie Mr. Roberts. Please click on the video, please rate it. Please subscribe to my channel. Please forward this video onto your Facebook pages. And check out all my reviews on my YouTube channel at rallyc.com. That's all WDY. NSC.com. That's the homepage and rally reviewer visiting more, and please check out all of his videos on his website. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.